Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Committee of the Whole for Monday, August 21st, 2017 to order. It's been moved by Councillor Durley that the agenda for the August 21st regular meeting of Committee of the Whole be adopted. Are there any changes? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. I do want to turn to the CAO, actually. Mr. CAO, in terms of the agenda, I did have a question from a councillor about why there's only items under one department and not others. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason for that is that directors will be submitting a consolidated summer report in September because of holidays, the shortened meeting schedule in July and August, and the ability to get reports done. So the direction that I gave the directors was to consolidate the summer activities into a comprehensive report in September, which you'll receive at the COW meeting then.
Okay, and these are sort of the most pressing items, and that's why they're here.
From Public Works, yes.
Yes, okay, great, thank you. Now we move to disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Do any members of council have any disclosures they need to make regarding conflicts of interest? No, okay, can that be noted that there are none? Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor King that Committee of the Whole received the August 21st, 2017 Emmett Street Stormwater Concerns Report, and the committee recommend that council direct staff to advance the capital projects in the 20-year forecast for design and construction of Pelham Street reconstruction, College to Pancake, and of Emmett Street. Questions or comments? I do want to say I appreciate the director bringing this report forward. I've received, as I'm no doubt council has and staff, some complaints about some of the storm events that are occurring on that particular street. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This used to be part of Ward 3, and while I was responsible for this area, I received a lot of comments there. And one of the observations that I did make was apparently the original engineering, I wasn't here at the time, but there was a swale type thing going in behind between College and Emmett that was designed to take some water down towards Station Street by the looks of it, and in many places it's been filled in by property owners. Is this a contributing factor to some of the problems that we're having there as well?
Ms. Clemencio, can you assist the councillor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I may. I'm just checking on the master plan because I'm not aware of that swale in the plans. I did attach the stormwater master plan that was prepared as part of the municipal class environmental assessment, and I'm not seeing recognition of the swale, although you can see it with the contour lines, that was there or removed. What I am aware of is that this plan for rerouting the water that comes from Pelham Street and west from the higher lands along Pelham down to Port Robinson. And the Port Robinson storm construction took that into account to plan for that water to be rerouted there. Currently, the water goes across Pelham Street and continues down Emmett. That rerouting hasn't happened yet, and it's contingent on that reconstruction. So that, as far as I know, has been in place for some time in the planning stages, just hasn't been executed yet.
Okay, so we're looking for it on a go-forward basis. This will correct the problem that historically happened, who knows how or why or when, right?
For you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, that is the plan. As long as we can get that input water to Emmett Street out, the actual sheet drainage happening on Emmett or the ditch network is far less taxed, and we wouldn't have the flooding concerns that we have now.
Okay, thank you. I am aware through you, Mr. Chair, some properties on College Street were also affected. Is this study taking into consideration some things on College as well?
Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, College Street is also in the 20-year capital plan for the same triggers, water main, storm, the need for storm infrastructure, in accordance with this plan as well. So again, the downstream outlets are being designed to take that water in advance, We just haven't executed the construction to get that infrastructure on College either, obviously, but it's in the 20-year capital plan.
It will come.
Mr. Chair, absolutely, as the forecast starts to unfold and we execute the projects in accordance with that.
I'm just wondering if people in college will say me too. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the director. Just looking at the stormwater master plan and taking into consideration what Councillor Durley just asked you, how far east would this construction on Emmett actually, what effect would it have going further east than College, or would it have?
Further east than
Mr. Chair.
College.
Can I ask you?
Sorry,
North?
further north.
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
sorry,
How far north of Pelham
of
Street?
Emmett. So if College is north, and so is Pelham Town Square, and we know that there are properties on Pelham Town Square that are being affected in the same way that properties on Emmett are being affected. So I'm just wondering, in this planning process, would those streets going north be taken into consideration at the same time?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe there's anything in the capital forecast for storm reconstruction on Pelham Town Square,
Okay.
only for College Street. Pelham Town Square has storm infrastructure already, and I am aware of some of the complaints that we've been dealing with. They are more of a civil nature between properties and how that water is being transferred from one property to the next. Less about the ability of the storm infrastructure to handle the general storm water during events.
Okay, I
Counselor?
appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other councillors? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what we're proposing is that we move this project up. I take it to put it into the budget for next year, for 2018?
Ms. Clemencio?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we're proposing we slide it forward, just quickly trying to see where it is right now. Of course, we've got a lot of other competing capital, so it would still go through the same black box for prioritizing, but with the reasoning behind it that would be documented through these minutes.
Right. So through you, Mr. Mayor, the report indicates interim measures that were taken. Those will be effective, will they, for whatever period of time it takes for us to get to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're piloting something at one of the properties that seems to be most affected. We haven't been able to see it really put to the test yet, but we're monitoring it. If it works, it's a short-term Band-Aid, if you will, for the nature of that particular lot, but the concepts might be applicable to other lots that are affected by the same kind of flooding. Upstream, further closer to Pelham Street, those same type of effects. It's essentially like a small swale. Might not be as effective because the root cause behind the flooding to the west is quite different than what we're seeing halfway down the street.
Right.
Anything further, councillor?
Not at this moment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Papp.
Just to build on my fellow councillors, especially Councillor Dern and I went through this back a number of years ago. And I would think the sooner the better that we consider the moving up of the, not only the plan, but the actual reconstruction for a number of different reasons. And I look forward to that prioritization during the course of our budget deliberations. But it's not a secret that we are experiencing some very extreme weather conditions, and I don't think that's going to slow down over the next few years. So notwithstanding, we have to look across the municipality. This particular area, I've seen it with my own eyes as well, and I don't usually, the water levels and what's happening there is getting more and more frequently harder to control. So I look forward to that to the discussion during our capital budget considerations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much, councillor. So, Ms. Clemencio, just to, again, to build on that and perhaps clarify, you said you put it into a black box and measure the criteria. So that's a way of looking at the capital projects and prioritizing? Is that what you're alluding to, the council's directed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I was alluding to the process we used last year. I'm not sure what the CAO has in mind for this year, if that's going to be modified, but we had a set of criteria that we reviewed together as SMT to prioritize.
I think we had that discussion, council, as well, in terms of safety, funding, risk, funding options, risk, et cetera, and, wealth creation, resiliency, et cetera. Value for money. Okay. I would, as we work on that, I'd be interested to know what the interim measure is. Again, folks all along the street are quite interested in this. It's interesting that those on the south side of Emmett don't appear to be as affected as those on the north. And I think that's because of the storm outlet at the top. So it seems that we've done some work on the top. We've done certainly the work down below the hill where the water flows, but we just need to get this middle piece in, and which is what the recommendation is, along with some changes on Pelham Street. And I think if we can take that as direction in terms of Councillor Durley's comment about the swales, it might be interesting to know, whether that's perhaps a mitigating measure or not. I know the city of Burlington, for instance, has been quite proactive when it comes to swales, historic swales in the community, because of a weather event that they had. So the motion is the committee received the report that we recommend the council direct staff to advance capital projects in the 20-year capital forecast for design and construction of Pelham Street reconstruction, College to Pancake, and of Emmett Street. And I think included in that is probably an investigation of what the swales are supposed to be in that area. Anything further from members of council? Okay, there being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Rivyak. The Committee of the Whole received the Public Works Report, Parking on Pelham Town Square, for information. Questions, comments?
It's pretty straightforward.
So this essentially is saying that staff will be marking those spots that are able to be marked. And will that be done this year, Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we weren't able to find additional parking spaces due to all the restrictions I listed. But as a one last item, we thought if we marked the spaces, it could encourage more use, make them more, public more aware. I'm not sure whether we can incorporate that into the operating budget for 2017. We're just compiled that list now, and the operating group is reviewing it. We were at budget last year with the current markings, so it might have to wait until 2018, or if so requested, we could add it and talk about the variance. But for now, I, with the budget where it is, I don't believe we would be able to incorporate it without going over budget.
Okay, thank you. Can we hear a little bit more about the sight lines? Emergency access, private access. I drive this road often. I know others do as well. It's it appears, especially on some of the corners, very sweeping, very large, very wide. And one might think, well, why can't one park there? Especially some areas in terms of in front of the post office, for instance, on the south side. Can we just hear a little bit more about that, Ms. Clemencio?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the areas that are widest, most sweeping, are the areas that have the curved, the most curve. And with the locations of the driveways, the access points where they are, when inspected on site and mapped out with AutoCAD, sightline restrictions were introduced if you have to assume that everybody is parking in every spot. And the risk taken on by us allowing that to be added as a parking spot, and the risk of collision due to sightlines was greater than that of the, so in conforming to the recommendation for having a visible triangle when you're pulling out of the driveway, no spots within that wider curved area could be found that had the best sightlines.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Powell.
I don't. How much would this cost to do this painting?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we pay about $35,000 a year to paint all of our markings.
But I'm talking about this site specifically.
So the 30, or it might be 33, I don't have the number on
Right.
hand, would add an extra half day, let's say, of labor for setup and painting. Knowing that we were at budget last year and knowing there aren't any predicted savings or anything being removed, we wouldn't be able to take it on unless in our review we find something doesn't need to be remarked, and that's why I'm just not certain until it goes through the operating group.
Councilor Powell.
I can't help it. So you know now, as of the end of August, that you have expended fully all of your budget for painting of lines, surfaces and that. Usually.
Not sure that that's what the director's saying, Madam Director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know what we spent last year,
Right.
and I know the list.
Right,
So
so,
we've prepared the list based on last year's. Last year's, we were at budget.
and that does not include this additional amount.
Correct, and we've had some additional additions or additional sites added to the list based on
On top of that.
crossings, school crossings, and changes in the legislation to make sure our crossings are properly marked.
So I'll end it at that. I look forward to the third quarter report on expenses and where we're at on various operating budgets to see, quite frankly, to see if there is some latitude and some flexibility, that if it's possible to do this particular painting, we could do it, and also to look at other possible projects, because it's crucial that 3/4 through the year, you know, sometimes we end up surpluses. All I'm saying is that if there was, the current list you have and what additions you've had, I'm thinking this would be somewhat of a minor, but I'll leave that till when we review our, would it be the third quarter results? That would probably be the end of September, right?
Yes. Well, it would end then, but,
But
Yeah.
sometime, you know, during that period.
and there might be paintings, I don't know what's on the list, but there might be paintings staff can look at.
Okay,
They may well have survived well through the
right, that's what
season,
I'm getting at.
or, you know, other paintings that don't necessarily have to be done.
That's fine.
this
Thank
year.
you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, it would be interesting to see if they are painted, what the effect is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. It's always good to have reports on committee because you can get into some of those nitty-gritty items. So thank you, Counselor. I need a mover for this. The Committee of the Whole received the Public Works Report, Pelham Street Storm Construction Revisiting the Need for Information, moved by Counselor King. Questions or comments? Let's kick this one off. Ms. Clemencio, so this is recommending sort of having a public meeting with those concerned landowners, talking about it, and you're also suggesting the potential for some funding to help deal with this. Can you just give us an overview in that way, please?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. The project has changed over the years in scope and nature due to several factors that I hope I explained well enough. So the request from council was to come back and reassess, do we still need to do this work? And the resounding answer is yes. There's the need for the infrastructure for a few reasons. We have promised a report back to the local residents on what the plan is, but we've held off on that until we knew really what we were doing and hopefully when. So there are several options with phasing, should that be more financially feasible. Obviously, the preference is to get into the neighborhood up have the upheaval and get out and finish. But the option to phase it over 2 years would also be there. And in terms of the lack of complaints that we've heard in the last little while, it is because our interim measure here is working well, but it is reminded, the council's committee's reminded that it's a temporary measure, that the water remains in the roadway in the swale and is making that roadway age prematurely and will continue to deteriorate along with the water main.
Okay, thank you. Just, maybe the director's not aware, but we have received several and various emails about this, especially most recently, so, and those folks that are most affected may want to come to the next council meeting. Questions, comments from members of council? We're good? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We look forward to hearing more about that important project as well. It's been moved by Councillor Papp. The Committee of the Whole receive the Public Works Report School Zone Safety Initiatives for information. The Committee of the Whole directs staff to update the Traffic and Parking Bylaw 89-2000 as amended to include updated speed limits and Schedule W and updated school zones in Schedule X accordingly. Questions, comments? Good to, I know this is something the director has commented on. It's something the community's interested in terms of these zones, especially the newly revised school, Wellington Heights on Canberra Road, and having that particular crossing. Councillor Durley.
The intention of this is very good, Mr. Chair. However, enforcement is the key, and how are we going to make sure that these are adhered to? Because I've witnessed vehicles going very high speeds through these zones and never ever being monitored. I think again, we have to get online with the police, perhaps in the early stages of this, just to make sure that people become more aware of it, because putting a sign up is great, but having police presence or something there to enforce the fact that these things are new and these things are happening may be a little more effective. It's the enforcement issue that is a very important matter here. So I just wonder if some consideration can be given and is there some answer for that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Menchio, CEO said that you might have an answer or comment on that.
Mr. Chair, that's a setup. No, I don't, other than when we do have complaints come in about speeding in school areas, the response from enforcement tends to be more reliable. So we would pass on those complaints immediately to the police for sure.
Okay, Councillor Durley. go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. On the first day of school, police are out in full force in school zones, and what I'm looking at is an initiative to say, we're changing speed limits at school zones in this particular spot. Can you put some people here just to make sure that people are aware that these changes have been made? A police presence will make people look twice, and that's the request that I would think we should make to the regional police, and they should be able to respond favorably to that, I would think.
Thank you very much, Councillor Durley. Perhaps we can include that as a takeaway, and that's something that we can work with the Niagara Regional Police Service on. It's a good point. Whenever there's a change, highlighting that change, talking about it, et cetera, is always important, and communicating that to drivers so that they're not sort of, it's a surprise. They were through there, yesterday, and then for 100 days before that, and then all of a sudden something changes. So it's a good point, and perhaps we can have that as a takeaway as we move forward. Anyone else on these initiatives?
Let's do it.
There being none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. It's good to see the changes occurring. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Junkin that Committee of the Whole receive the Public Works Report Winter Operations Plan, and the Committee of the Whole recommend the Council acknowledge an operating budget variance in 2017 regarding winter operations. And the Committee of the Whole recommend the Council direct staff to make budget requests in 2018 budgets in accordance with Option 1, leasing fleet and maintaining roads using internal staff. Questions, comments? Councillor Papp?
I respect and understand what we're trying to say. I would like to leave this to our budget consideration discussions. I realize that there's several comments I could make, but I mean, at this stage of the game, one of them is, do we know where we're going to end up in 2017? Do we have an idea? Are we going to be over budget, under budget? It says here we're going to be over budget. We know by how much? Do we have any idea? If we don't,
So, Ms. Clementia, over budget in this particular item, we should underscore. Is that
winter
correct?
operations.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have forwarded an estimate of the variances
Need
related
to
to
know that.
winter operations to the treasurer. If you bear with me, I can pull up what those numbers are. And if I can I'll also respond, the only risk in the delay of the decision is that, as was stated in the report, we're not certain that we can meet our minimum maintenance standards for this coming winter without some provision of fleet contracted services to ensure that we have coverage. You might recall we've had some fleet go down and we didn't replace, and that's the urgency here.
Councillor?
For the sake of expediency and continuing, I would ask that you prepare that type of information for September 5th report. I don't need, I think you've seen this before. I understand you're going to be over budget. That's not unusual at times, but I think it's more important for us to get ready for what we're predicting for winter. And winter, when you say 2017, you're actually talking about what, November 1st to April 30th of the following year?
No, to the end of the year.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting at. So if there's 2 months of, forgive me, Mr. Mayor, but if there's 2 months of anticipated winter situations, then let's do as a best guesstimate we can, knowing what we've already spent to date. And let's then consider also the other options that you come forward. There's a lot of information in here, and I think it's
Yeah.
part of a lot of policy discussion, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rubbiak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to build on Councillor Papp's concerns. I'm concerned as well that this entire issue has a lot of twists and turns in it, and I think it also has implications for a much longer term than just the coming winter. I'm just wondering whether it wouldn't be wise as well for us to kind of separately and solely deal with this in some sort of exercise where we can fully explore all the options and have a good give and take about what we're trying to do with this thing, not only for the year to come, but for the years to come. If we get into some of the capital expenditures around equipment, that's got to be good for a considerable period of time, longer than just the season. So I'd like to suggest, if we can, that we kind of table the discussion to the nearest possible date when we can just deal with this alone, get a presentation on it, have a discussion on it, so we can fully understand all of the implications and maybe make a better decision on this thing.
And maybe that's why Councillor Papp suggested that it be sent to budget for consideration.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. We can consider that as an amendment. Let's see if there's other colleagues that want to comment first. Anyone else? I had a question, and I think this builds on your comment, Councillor, about additional information. I mean, if you look at the options, there is one option that's not being recommended, as I read it, that's cheaper and perhaps better, and that's option 3. So seemed like it was cheaper on the budget. Ms. Clemencio, can you clarify?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it wasn't recommended because that's the option to continue to purchase fleet to support winter operations and keep the winter operations fully staffed internally. So because we've been exploring leasing and it seems to be a little bit more palatable for flexibility with capital, you're putting out small amounts of capital every year for leasing rather than large amounts of capital every few years or whatever it might be for fleet replacement. That's why it rated slightly less than the leasing option. if I can say all three options weren't terrible, we would stand by all three. That's what the group that did the How Might We narrowed this down to. There were quite a few more options. These were the three most viable that all rated quite well.
Okay. So, Councilor Rivak, you're suggesting that we hold a special session.
Yeah,
Maybe we
I
can
think
leave that as
this-
direction.
That's right, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an issue that we really want to get our heads around and fully understand. I think the implications are such that we would want to be more certain than certainly I am at the moment, just reading the report
Right.
and then, but having a vote on it within this brief period. I think it deserves more discussion.
Okay.
I certainly need it.
All right, thank you. Mr. Seo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to inform council that there was some feedback from Councillor Kersey as well. The treasurer indicated that to me this afternoon, and my response is we don't have the time to be able to answer the questions that he's posed. There was a number of them that were fairly detailed questions that we would need some more time. So I know that I can report that Councillor Kersey has also weighed in on this, even though he's absent this evening.
Okay, thank you.
I would
Perhaps
imagine.
the deputy mayor and I can work with the CAO and the clerk to
Yep.
schedule an appropriate meeting.
Yeah.
And perhaps we can, perhaps a motion to postpone is in order, is that correct, Madam Clerk?
You could refer it to a special meeting.
Refer? Okay, so we can refer it to a special meeting. I think some of the information that Councilor Papp, you asked in terms of what are the costs, what's our estimate, et cetera, that can be included
Yep.
when we do that special meeting, and we should know, this is the first time aware that Councilor Kersey asked some questions. We should know what those questions are, and try and get the answers to them. So Councilor Ribbiak, will you move that referral to so receive and refer to a special meeting to discuss this issue? Okay. And we'll see if we can add it to the next P&P meeting.
We need to go through it, just to get it clear.
Okay, anything further on that referral, receive and referral? Going to call the question, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Important issue, and it's something that we discussed last year as well. So we'll get into it a little more teeth. Those are the items on our agenda. I need a mover for this. Councilor Papp. That this regular meeting of Committee of the Whole be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for September 5th, 2017, following council. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.